The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Sarah Martinez couldn't bring herself to move from the hospital waiting room chair. Her daughter's medical chart lay crumpled in her trembling hands, the words experimental treatment and last option blurring together through her tears. 8-year-old Emma had been fighting leukemia for 2 years, and now the doctors were asking for a miracle neither science nor insurance could provide. The treatment existed, pioneered by a brilliant researcher at Johns Hopkins, but at $2.3 million, it might as well have been on the moon. Sarah worked 3 jobs at cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves at dawn, and serving lunch at the diner downtown. Her husband Miguel pulled double shifts at the construction site, his calloused hands cracked and bleeding by week's end. Together, they'd saved $30,000 over 18 months, selling everything they owned except Emma's beloved teddy bear and the family photos that lined their cramped apartment walls. It wasn't even close to enough. "Mama, why are you crying?" Emma's voice, thin as paper but still carrying that spark of curiosity that had defined her since she could speak, made Sarah quickly wipe her eyes. "Just tired, Mija," Sarah whispered, forcing a smile as she tucked the chart under her purse. "The doctor says we need to talk about some new medicine." Emma nodded solemnly, her bald head catching the fluorescent light. At 8, she understood more about hospitals and needles and the way adults whispered in corners than any child should. "Is it expensive medicine?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd tried so hard to shield Emma from the financial burden, but children notice everything. "Don't you worry about that, baby. Mama and Papa will figure it out." That evening, after Miguel had fallen asleep on their second-hand couch still wearing his work boots, Sarah found herself at the kitchen table with her laptop, a gift from her sister when this all started. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, paralyzed by pride and desperation warring in her chest. She'd seen the stories online, the fundraising pages with their smiling photos and heartbreaking pleas. She'd even donated her spare dollars to a few, back when she had spare dollars to give. But this was different. This was admitting that everything she and Miguel had worked for their entire lives wasn't enough to save their daughter. The cursor blinked in the empty text box like a patient heartbeat. "Emma Martinez is 8 years old and loves butterflies, knock-knock jokes, and helping her mama cook Sunday dinner," Sarah finally typed, her vision blurring again. "She also has acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and we're running out of time." For 3 hours, Sarah poured her heart onto the screen, describing Emma's laugh that could light up a room, her determination to learn Spanish so she could talk to her abuela in Mexico, her dream of becoming a teacher because teachers help people learn cool stuff. "Mama," she wrote about the experimental CAR T-cell therapy, about Dr. Reynolds at Johns Hopkins who'd agreed to take Emma's case, about the narrow window they had before the disease progressed too far. She uploaded the photo that always made her cry, Emma at her 6th birthday party, before the diagnosis, chocolate cake smeared on her grin as she hugged their golden retriever, Max. In the picture, Emma wore a bright yellow dress with butterfly patterns, her long dark hair in pigtails tied with ribbons Miguel had picked out himself. At 2 a.m., Sarah hit publish on the GoFundMe page and immediately wanted to take it back. What if people thought she was a fraud? What if no one cared? What if she just exposed her family's desperation to the entire world for nothing? The first donation came at 6:47 a.m. while Sarah was getting ready for her shift at the diner. $25 from someone named Jennifer Walsh in Portland, Oregon, with a note that simply said, "Praying for Emma." Sarah stared at her phone screen, overwhelmed by the kindness of a complete stranger. By lunch, the page had raised $340. By dinner, $1,200. Sarah showed Miguel when he got home, his dusty work clothes hanging on his frame like he'd shrunk inside them from exhaustion. "People are sharing it," she whispered, scrolling through Facebook posts and Twitter tweets. "Look, this woman in Texas shared it with her church group. This man in Chicago posted it on his company's message board." Miguel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, leaving clean streaks through the construction dust on his cheeks. "Strangers," he said quietly. "Strangers who care about our Emma." What happened next defied everything Sarah thought she knew about human nature. The story spread like wildfire, not because of marketing or media manipulation, but because people saw themselves in Emma's smile. Parents imagined their own children in that hospital bed. Grandparents remembered birthday parties and butterfly dresses. Teachers thought of students who brought them handmade cards and stayed after class just to talk. A radio DJ in Nashville mentioned Emma's story during his morning show, choking up as he read Sarah's words about Emma wanting to be a teacher. A blogger in Seattle wrote about the power of community in the face of impossible circumstances. A news anchor in Phoenix, whose own son had survived cancer, shared a link on her personal social media with a photo of Emma side by side with her son at his graduation. The donations started coming from everywhere. $5 from a college student who said she was broke but Emma deserves a chance. $50 from a retired teacher who wrote for a future educator. $100 from a construction crew in Detroit who'd taken up a collection after Miguel's foreman, who'd heard about the story, told them about another father fighting for his child. But it was more than money. Care packages arrived at their apartment, art supplies, books, stuffed animals for Emma to donate to other kids in the children's ward. A chef in Boston sent recipes for kid-friendly meals that might appeal to someone going through treatment. A teenager in Florida started a social media campaign called #ButterflyStrong, encouraging people to post pictures of butterflies with Emma's hashtag. Emma, whose energy had been flagging for weeks, seemed to come alive as her mother read the messages aloud. "Mama, this lady says I inspired her to become a teacher. This boy says he's going to draw me a butterfly. Look, this grandpa says I remind him of his granddaughter." 2 weeks after Sarah published the page, they'd raised $180,000. It was more money than Sarah had ever seen in one place, but still not enough. The treatment window was closing, and Dr. Reynolds had started talking about alternative options, a kind of ways of saying palliative care. That's when the call came. "Mrs. Martinez, this is Patricia Goldman from the Goldman Foundation." The woman's voice was warm, professional. "We've been following Emma's story, and we'd like to help. We're prepared to cover the remaining cost of her treatment." Sarah dropped the phone. The Goldman Foundation, she learned, was established by a tech entrepreneur whose own daughter had died of leukemia 20 years earlier. They quietly funded cutting-edge pediatric cancer research and occasionally stepped in to help families access experimental treatments. They'd seen Emma's story, been moved by the community response, and decided to make her their Christmas miracle. "But there's one condition," Patricia had said when Sarah finally found her voice again. "We'd like you to consider sharing Emma's journey as she goes through treatment, not for publicity, but to help other families understand that these experimental therapies exist, that hope exists." Standing in the hospital corridor 3 months later, watching Emma play with the therapy dog while waiting for her latest test results, Sarah thought about that moment. The treatment had been brutal. Weeks of her daughter connected to machines that filtered her blood and re-engineered her immune system to fight the cancer. There had been setbacks, infections, nights when Sarah wasn't sure Emma would see morning. But there had also been victories. Emma's white blood cell count steadily improving. Her appetite returning. The day she laughed at one of Miguel's terrible jokes so hard that she snorted, and Sarah really knew that her daughter was coming back to them. "Mrs. Martinez?" Dr. Reynolds appeared beside her, Emma's latest test results in his hands. His smile told her everything before he spoke a word. Emma's latest scans show no detectable cancer cells. We're calling it a complete remission. Sarah's knees gave out. Miguel caught her, and together they cried in the hallway while Emma, oblivious to the magnitude of the moment, continued playing with the golden retriever therapy dog, her laughter echoing off the hospital walls. That evening, Sarah sat down to write an update for the thousands of strangers who had become extended family. Emma was curled up next to her, finally with enough energy to help compose the message. "Dear everyone who saved my life," Emma dictated, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Thank you for proving that love is bigger than money, and that families come in all shapes and sizes. I can't wait to be a teacher someday so I can tell my students about the time the whole world helped a little girl with butterflies on her dress." Sarah typed the words through tears, understanding finally why the fundraiser had worked when so many others didn't. It wasn't about the money, though the money had been crucial. It was about people recognizing that Emma's fight was everyone's fight, that her hope belonged to all of them. The story of Emma Martinez became more than a successful fundraiser. It became a reminder that in a world that often feels divided and harsh, ordinary people still believe in extraordinary kindness. That strangers will fight for a child they've never met, fund treatments they can't pronounce, and invest their hearts in a family they'll likely never encounter face to face. And sometimes, when the circumstances align and the need is great and the story resonates in just the right way, that collective kindness can work miracles. Sometimes, love really is enough to move mountains or at least to move $2.3 million from the hearts and wallets of people who understand that every child deserves a chance to chase butterflies on summer afternoons. Emma's hair grew back curly, which delighted her to no end. She returned to school, threw herself into her studies, and started a butterfly garden in the hospital courtyard with donations from her online family. And Sarah kept writing, sharing updates about recovery and relapse prevention, about gratitude and the responsibility that comes with being saved by strangers. Because some stories don't end with happily ever after. The best ones end with "and then she helped others find their happy ending too."